All right, guys, welcome to Surviving Ish. But I think today we're going to call this episode Surviving Unholier Ish because we've got Jenny with us, who I know that you all know and love from Unholier. But we also have a good friend of ours who's been on the show multiple times, Dr. Sandra Cox. This is going to be an episode where kind of Jenny's world and my world collides, and Sandra's going to be a part of it. And we're going to talk about the psychology behind cults.
Yeah, I love this. I'm excited. I'm so excited. And it's so great to meet you, Sandra and David. It's always fun to be with you.
I'm very excited. David has said so many good things about you. And
Oh,
of course, I always enjoy having time with David. He's a wonderful friend.
I know I can't wait to come to California and see you.
Yes, you need
It's gonna be so
to.
much fun.
Definitely.
I want to come.
Yeah, come
Yeah.
on. Yeah,
Yes,
there's
no,
room
no
for
doubt, no
everybody.
question. You're going.
Okay, good.
So a lot of my listeners, Sandra, already know you because you've been a guest. I think this is like your third or fourth time with me now.
Yeah.
But do you want to give a little bit of like just a summary of who you are so people understand where this information is coming from?
Sure. Well, I am a psychiatrist. I have been practicing since residency for now 30 years. That's kind of hard to say because it makes me feel really old. But I've done a lot of different things in psychiatry. I've been through kind of the gamut of community psychiatry, state hospital work, private practice, kind of all of it. And now I own and operate actually soon to be three TMS centers, transcranial magnetic stimulation centers. But my interests have been varied, of course, and you can't be a psychiatrist without understanding psychology. So I'm not a psychologist. I did go to medical school. I started out in OBGYN. I switched to psychiatry. You have to understand psychology to be a psychiatrist.
Yeah.
So what is the difference between like a psychiatrist and a psychologist? Is it just that one can prescribe medication or
So psychiatrists go to medical school. And when you go to medical school, you can go to residency in any number of different things. Surgery, family practice, psychiatry, internal medicine, all of that kind of stuff. But psychologists go to college. I always say their route is harder, I think, because they then go to graduate school and then they have to write a dissertation to become a doctor. They have to write a dissertation, present that in front of a committee. It's a very, very rigorous way to get your education. But both ways are hard and we would learn a lot. So yeah, that's the difference. Psychologists don't go to medical school, therefore they don't prescribe medications.
okay, so they're both dealing in the mental health space though.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I want to throw this out. You know, Jenny is the host of Unholier, like a lot of you all know, and at the time of this recording, which we're going to get this episode out pretty quick, she's been releasing. I think it's what, a total of three, maybe four parts of your story because you come from the IFB, the Independent Fundamental Baptist cult,
Mhm.
and your family was actually kind of some of the founders of this
Mhm.
cult.
Mhm.
So I would love for the listeners, if y'all are not following Unholy, I would love for y'all to do that and check out her story. I got to go to Florida, spend some time with Jenny, and we actually recorded it in person. And I was the guest host on her show, interviewing the host. So it was really cool. We had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. All right, Sandra, I want to start out with this question. One of the things that I like about me and Jenny when we have this conversation is I don't come from a cult. I have some religious trauma, but nothing like a cult religious trauma, right? So it's kind of interesting to see and hear both of our perspectives. So let's start out with this question. Is there a certain type of personality that gets targeted? Or is it like a moment in life?
Well, I think that we have to be cautious about trying to lump cult members into a certain type of person because that can sort of start to resemble victim blaming, if you will.
Sure.
But people who are drawn into cults typically are at some point in their lives or some point in general societal history that causes them to feel isolated or scared or in need of support that they don't have. And so that vulnerability is often what is targeted by cult leaders and other cult members who are now indoctrinated and really, living by the doctrine of the cult. Because when you join a cult, what typically happens is you are love bombed. So I want us to bring this back. We've all had over the past decade, let's say, I'm not going to relate that to anything in particular, the lessons in narcissistic abuse and lessons in what a narcissist looks like and what their tactics are. And cult leaders are typically narcissistic, but tend to be more than just narcissistic. They tend to fit in what we call the dark triad: narcissism, psychopathy, and Machiavellianism.
Mm.
And we can talk more about that in a little bit, but they are masters at just looking at someone. In fact, they can just look at someone on a dating profile, just the photo, and they know if you're a good target.
Mm.
It's almost like the hunting sense of a shark, if you will. They know their prey. So the the typical cult member starts out as someone who is very good-hearted,
Mm.
um, really fits into kind of the opposite, the light triad, is empathetic, is forgiving, wants the best in others, and or wants to see the best in others, and that's what gets targeted.
Yep.
I do want to say thank you for helping me along with that question because there is an ignorant side of me to things, to especially to this type of world, and I would never want to victim blame. So you teach me so much. So thank you for that.
Well, and
Um,
I'm not blaming, I'm not saying that that's what you're doing, but
Absolutely.
I do, this has been a turnaround in my own thinking
Sure.
recently,
Yeah.
because I think a lot of us are angry about some of the things that we see happening right now in our world, and we want to blame the people who've become victims of a psychopathic Machiavellian narcissist.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and that's something that I'm trying to inherit and
Mhm.
learn from. Someone had told me one time that the reason, and I can't speak for everyone, obviously, but that a lot of people join gangs because they're looking for a father figure, they're looking for the brotherhood, they're looking for everything that you just mentioned. They just need some kind
Right.
of security blanket, and then it ends up being destructive. So, but a gang is not considered a cult, right? Like those are still two different things, but it's the same kind of with
It
word
it can
mentality
it
be.
can be considered a cult.
Okay, okay,
It can most definitely, because of the indoctrination into the gang and the need to give up your independent thinking and your critical thinking in favor of what the doctrine of the gang is, and the lead that who decides that? The leader of the gang.
gotcha.
Hmm. Yeah, that's an interesting point, David, with gangs. And I think you really brought out a good point, Sandra, about saying that the people that often are in cults are in the light triangle, where they are very empathetic, they are very forgiving, they are generally good people, right? They're good citizens in society. So when you think in terms of I came out of a cult, so I can see those types of people. I still have family members that are in the cult. I have family members that are in a certain political cult that we're kind of touching on a little bit. And that's why it's hard for me to go right for the jugular when I'm talking about this stuff because I know that deep down they are good people. They're just brainwashed. Like they think that they're decisions and that their truth is that's the end of it. There's no anything outside of that is not truth to them. So it's hard for them to understand where anyone outside of that cult mentality is coming from. And I think that when we are able to have a civil conversation with people and show them that this other side over here that you think is, the dark side, there are good people over here too, then if you're able to have those dialogues, those civil dialogues, then maybe that would open up their mind a little bit and say, maybe I was wrong about those people. Maybe they are good people on the other side too. And I can open myself up to have those kinds of conversations with them and hopefully then break down those barriers. And that's really like a goal that I have with my podcast and just talking to people in a way that is going to get them to just lay down the arm or, just lay it down and say, okay, let's have a conversation and hopefully open themselves up to other possibilities.
I hear you and I see you, Jenny. I hear what you're telling me. And I'm going to learn it. I'm trying my damnedest, okay?
Him and I have had many conversations. I'm like, I love you, David. I do. I love
No,
you.
I know you do. And it is something that I want to learn. And that's why I'm also looking forward to this conversation because on one of the episodes that Sandra and I had together, I had made a comment about how I don't know that I could ever forgive someone who is a part of this MAGA cult. But Sandra made a really good point to me. And it really has me thinking. I called Jenny immediately and was like, uh-oh. I'm having thoughts now about maybe I should be a little bit more understanding and not completely vote someone off an island kind of thing. But so I'm learning too, right? And what I do appreciate about me and is that I know that I'm not perfect. I know that I have a lot of growing to do. I know that I'm going to make mistakes and I try to be accountable for those mistakes. I admit to those. I admit to where I'm weak and I'm trying to fix it. So if everyone could be like me, wait, that's how cults start. That's how cults start.
While we're on the roller coaster ride up to the point of being magnanimous, I'm going to take us back down a little bit because if we're going to, you said it. So now that you've said it, I'm going to say it. If we're going to start talking about MAGA, I think we have to acknowledge that they are not a monolith, right? There are members of MAGA that have different reasons for identifying with MAGA. Pardon me, I talk with my hands all the time. And some of those reasons are nefarious to you and I. Their racism, for instance, their bigotry that maybe they don't want to admit to, maybe they do admit to, but that doctrine of MAGA gave them permission to be out and proud about it. So there are those. There are others that are more like the vulnerable that needed a place to feel they felt like they were forgotten. They
Mhm.
felt like a certain segments of society, particularly the elite, the educated, had forgotten about them and didn't care about them. And they needed a place to belong. And here he comes presenting himself
As Jesus Christ.
now now, most literally as the savior, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
No, he meant doctor. He
He
had
meant
a,
doctor. I don't know. My doctor wears those robes with the shawl around it, and yeah, it glows, and yeah.
right.
It's so funny to me because, and I don't know if this is true or not, but like I've seen people saying online that they were trying to tell him that to tell people that the pictures were doctored, but all he heard was doctor, and so then he was like, "No, I was being a doctor," and I was like, "But you like was it a Red Cross doctor that you defunded?"
I said,
Like,
doctor, were you?
oh
Oh
my gosh.
man.
So, okay, now this question, I'm going to come to it it'll almost be a little bit lighthearted, but I think it'll get us to a bigger place. So, it was always like a running joke with the world, I guess, that Taylor Swift has a cult, like her cult following. But does it ever get to a place, and not necessarily with Taylor, but in generally speaking, like where would that fine line be when it comes to like a sports team or my love for Reba or someone's love for Taylor, to where it becomes like a cult?
So, Pardon me if I'm talking too much, but I think it's important to maybe it's important to discuss the characteristics of a cult.
Yeah, please.
Okay. And there was a guy, a psychiatrist with the last name of Lifton, who's written what he calls eight deadly sins of cults. And the first one is milieu control. Milieu just means environmental control. So control of all your communication. When you enter a cult, typically the cult leaders want to cut you off from the outside world. They forbid you to talk with anyone who's not a member of that cult. And they even start to monitor your communication within the cult with one another. There's strong encouragement to just cut off your family if they're not a part of the cult. And it sets up an antagonism against anyone who's outside of the cult. So I think with MAGA, we can say that with the rhetoric of demonizing anyone who's not a part of MAGA over and over and over, that sets up that idea, that indoctrination, that we should only be communicating with one another. Anyone outside of this group is evil, they're wrong. And the goal is to make members start to monitor their own thoughts, actually, their own thoughts, not just their communication. So they give up their ability to think on their own. Then there's something called mystical manipulation where the group leader is typically very charismatic and presents him or herself as having very special knowledge that that it will be imparted to you as a member of this cult. You will be uplifted by their mystical powers, whether it be their power to save the world or, make egg prices lower. Whatever that might be, the leader claims. And then there's a demand for purity. So your group will increasingly call for loyalty, donations of time and money. How many of us don't know or haven't heard of some poor little grandma who's living on food stamps, but donates and over and over and over
Mhm.
again to some politician or, mega church preacher because she believes that's what she ought to do. They teach you that. Any actions not dedicated to the cause is labeled selfish. And
Mhm.
then the number four is the cult of confession, where you confess your sins to one another. Now, this may not be a part of MAGA necessarily. Jenny, you may have experienced this where you have to confess your sins,
Mhm.
so to speak. And you do that many times publicly so that everybody now knows your secrets, right? Especially
Mhm.
the leader, and that can be used against you. Then there's the sacred science or secret inside information that makes members more special. These are people who feel isolated otherwise. So when they get brought into a cult, they start to feel they're made to feel like now you're a part of something that's really secret and really sacred, and that makes you very special. And then there's loading the language. So repeated phrases becoming the explanation for everything. Can you think of any MAGA phrases that have been repeated over and over and are the explanation for everything?
Yes.
Fake news, that would be the one that I think we've heard the most.
Yeah, and the enemy within,
The enemy within,
c-
radical left,
yeah,
right?
comes to mind.
Drain the swamp.
Drain the swamp. Yeah, and so that instead of having real explanations for problems or need for solutions, it's this one little catchphrase. Then number seven is the doctrine over person. That's gaslighting, where, and this happens in families as well, where, the parent abuses the child cries, and the parent tells the child, "What are you crying about? You have nothing to cry about. You're so sensitive." Or the wife says, "Hey, that really hurt my feelings." "What? I didn't do anything. What are you
Mhm.
talking about?" This
Oh
gaslighting.
yeah.
Yep. So your own perspective is rejected, and you have to adopt the perspective of the leader of the cult. And then number 8 is dispensing of existence. And this is the most dangerous one, where the leader claims knowledge of determining who's worthy of being saved and who isn't. And that's where things start to get really dangerous. That's where cults like Jonestown, Heaven's Gate, where there's been mass suicide because the leader has determined that you're not worthy of saving.
Hmm.
Drink the Kool-Aid.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Mm-hmm.
and it's so crazy to me too that where drink the Kool-Aid or you drink the Kool-Aid has become such a
Mm-hmm.
cliche term now that people don't really know where that came from. And
Where it came from.
yeah. And you know, so out of all of these, there was one somewhere in the middle, and I was trying to remember which one, maybe three or four, and I felt like maybe shame what was in there. I guess when you're talking about having to confess the sins, right? When you're
Yes, the
relating it
cult
to
of
kind of like the
compassion. Yes.
yeah, relating it to Jenny with and one of the stories that, you know, came to mind is when Jenny was put on stage and humiliated, and her
Mhm.
family was sitting on a row watching it happen and didn't stop. And what was it, Jenny? You all were sitting in a chair and like something was dumped on you all, right?
Yeah, so I was 13 years old. I was at a youth camp with our church youth group. My dad was there, and me and this other girl were called up to the stage, and we were then basically mocked this whole time in front of 800 teenagers. And they said they were going to make us a public example because we took care of our appearance, and that is vanity, and vanity is a sin. So they proceeded to take these grown men who were like our youth leaders, took a bucket of raw eggs and started cracking them over mine and this girl's hair. And then they were like rubbing it in our hair. And then they were taking like either ketchup or like raspberry jelly or something red, like red. It was all food type materials. And they were rubbing it on our face, like for blush and lipstick, and just, oh, we'll do your makeup for you. We'll make you look. And it was humiliating. And you think about the age 13, like you're like going through puberty, like you're starting to really like take care of yourself and care about what you look like.
Your
And
peers' opinions is make or
yes,
break.
and my dad literally sat on the front row and laughed with everybody else in the audience. And I just remember getting off the stage and running back to our dormitory and just feeling for the first time in a long time, since age 7 or 8, when I talked about the other story, just completely betrayed by everyone. Who is there to rescue me or defend me in that moment? No one. And I felt like I just was on an island and totally humiliated. And I think I still have some trauma from that, honestly, because
Sure.
Oh,
I get stage fright like nobody else. And I almost think like maybe I still have some trauma from that. Like if I'm asked to go up and speak or do something, I'm like, oh my gosh, like I can't do this right now.
yeah. Well, it's horrifying and so cruel.
Yeah,
Yeah, I'm so sorry for little 13-year-old Jenny.
I know. Me too. I know.
Yeah,
It's
and
sad.
it is, but thank you for sharing that with us because that was just the one thing that just really came to my mind immediately to kind of like paint a picture
Yeah.
for what we were just speaking of. That shaming is just
Yeah,
shameful.
and I even had friends too. Like I had a couple of friends in high school. Now, again, like a lot of these bullet points you're giving, I'm like checking them off in my head. I'm like, yep, that's the way I was
I
raised.
was watching you and I could
Yeah.
tell. Yeah.
And the confession thing is so on point because I had friends. Now, again, you were isolated to your church group of people. You couldn't have really any friends outside of that. And a couple of the girls that I went to high school with got pregnant in high school. I mean, kids are kids. I mean, things will happen, whatever. And they even went to a Christian school. I mean, it still happens. And they were forced to get up in front of the entire church and confess that sin to everybody. The odd thing was is that none of the boys ever had to do it. It was just only the females. And it was I was mortified for my friend. I'm like, what? This is the most humiliating thing, you know? And it was almost like The excuse was they have to confess it so then they can be restored. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a process of public humiliation,
Hmm.
to make you feel more vulnerable and remorseful, and therefore more dependent on the cult and particularly the leader,
Hmm.
or trying to redeem yourself and earn back your value in that group.
Yeah, because you really do grow up thinking that you are not worthy. In fact, you're told you're not worthy, that you are nothing without God and you are worth nothing without him. And that's it. So you are told you have to deny yourself anything that is pleasurable, you have to deny yourself of that. Whether it be, say, you want to go listen to rock music because you like to dance. Well, you can't do that because that's feeding into the lust of the flesh in your body. And then somebody might see you dancing and lust after you. Then you'll be, in charge of the fact that they sinned because they lust after you. I
Right,
mean, it's just
right,
this like domino effect of you're never good enough. And if you do anything, it's your fault.
right.
So it's a frustrating existence, honestly, when you're in that cult. And, but yeah, going through all of those, I'm like, this, yeah. And then repeated phrases and the gaslighting. And then the last one that you said was who's worthy of salvation. They absolutely teach that,
Hmm.
right? Now they claim to say everybody's worthy of salvation. They just have to accept it by faith, but they actually don't believe that in practice.
Right.
That's just a bunch of lip service that they say. But when it comes down to it, you also have to maintain this certain standard that they set for you,
Right.
or then they start to question your own faith. Like it's, yeah.
And in the most extreme forms, of course, I would say, of course, always that applies to anyone who's not in the cult, in the group, that they are not worthy of their existence. And in the most extreme forms, that becomes okay, so now we're going to go to war and we're going to kill all of them. And we're seeing that happen around the world.
Hmm. Yeah. And they would really encourage us to go out and try and convert people and get people into the church. They used to tell us like once a week, they would say, okay, now we're all going to go out. They would give us maps and they would map out the whole area and they would send van loads of people to certain sections of the area and say, okay, now you got to door knock all of these 200, 300 houses, and you're knocking on these strangers' doors, asking them, if you died today, would you go to heaven or hell? You don't even you don't even know this person's name. You don't know anything about them. You're just telling a perfect stranger because the goal is you're trying to convert more people into this cult.
Hmm.
And
Right.
because you're told without this belief system, they're evil and they're going to die and go to hell. And
Hmm.
so you're also taught that, like, if you have any kind of relationship with these people, then you're going to go down this dark path of, you're just going to become evil as well. It's crazy. It really is.
Right. Yeah, it's also the expectation that you will give up all your worldly possessions,
Hmm.
your money, your property. You will wear what they tell you to wear. You give up your bodily autonomy. In the cult, Children of God, that was literally a cult, a sex cult that involved incest and pedophilia. And it was taught that that is just a way, that leader David Berg taught that's just another way of showing God's love.
Yeah, I actually had a guest on my podcast. Her name is Kim Kelly. She came from that cult, and her mother was one of the cult leaders. She actually helped write that book.
Mhm. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
So
sick.
you can be expected to start believing just about anything. And I think the greatest number of members of Children of God, I could be wrong about this, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think many of them were born into it
Mhm.
because they were very sexually prolific, reproduced a lot. And so they just kept these children in that lineage.
And it's different when you're born into a cult versus going into a cult
Right.
like willingly. I was born into the cult. So I don't I didn't know any different growing up. And I've talked to David about this on many occasions where there have been times, even in my deconstruction, removed, 20 years from the cult, that I still have to examine myself and say, okay, is this like my cult mentality brain that's
Right.
switched on that I'm judging this person for this, that, and the other thing? Or is this how I actually think?
Mhm.
And I have to take a step back sometimes and say, like, which is it?
I have to do that too with, is this victim David, or is this David on the healing side? Like, which David is this? So
Right.
am I giving myself false or toxic positivity by saying that that's okay and that's never going to go away, but I have the tools to manage those thoughts, or is it toxic that I think that way?
Well, I think it depends on whether or not you are talking about if you say victim, David, again, I want you to be cautious with that term because none of us willingly becomes a victim,
Right.
right? And so it's normal that after you've been victimized to blame yourself because that's what society does to us as well. And that's why many people who suffer from PTSD suffer from extreme remorse and shame and guilt because there's this part of them that believes that they did this to themselves. And I'm not just talking about, women who are, for instance, raped and then the system, drags women through the victim blaming, well, what were you wearing? Why were you out so late? Why were you alone in that? All of that other stuff. But this also applies to, military members who look back and they try to think, well, what if I hadn't driven down that particular road? If I hadn't sat in the back seat, then, and I'd been in the front seat, then I would have been the one that took the hit and the people in the back seat would have lived like I did. It's all of this, all of the ways that we contort ourselves to try to blame ourselves for what happens. And so I think it's really important, David, that you have compassion for what you call the victim part of you. We all really need to. And Jenny, I'm sure that you've had to catch yourself in that as well, that
Hmm.
that self-blaming or whatever. I think all of us I'm the survivor of two rapes and domestic abuse. And it's hard for me. I no longer blame myself for the rapes because I was a teenager when it happened and I was overpowered. But the domestic abuse, I blame myself for not seeing the signs and how could this happen to me because I should know better and all of that kind of stuff. I think we have to stop that. Just stop it. Yes, to the extent that you learn a lesson, what maybe not what to watch for, the red flags, what precautions to take in the future, but not the, oh, this is my fault. Way to go.
And if this question is going to be too far ahead, then we can definitely put a pin in it. But when you were just sharing with us, how you would victim blame yourself, right? Of why did I see the red flags? Is is that how you had mentioned that there can be cults inside just a household? It doesn't have to be hundreds of people. And I always thought it had to be like a huge following, right? I always thought it had to be 100 plus when
Right.
that's not true. So is that how like that household cult kind of starts is I guess because not seeing the red flags, not knowing that there's red flags is part of the grooming process and correct any verbiage that I'm not using correctly. But like, is it a grooming process that starts that household, that small atmosphere?
I think that that begins with the person with the dark triad personality, finding a person with a light triad personality to partner with and have children. And the children, like Jenny, don't know any better. You're born into it.
Hmm.
So, yeah, Jenny, I'm very, I don't know if this is jumping ahead, but So anxious to know how you extricated yourself and what was the fallout in your life from that and what were the benefits.
Oh, wow. Okay. So, how much time do you have? I'll try and make this as brief as possible.
But this would be a great place to put a shameless plug in because,
That's right. Yeah, because I actually did just have a full episode about this with David last week on my podcast, but then we also talked about it on my part one too. But anyways, just a brief summary. The arranged marriage that I was put into by my dad, who was the pastor of the church I was attending, of course, because I grew up in that church. The guy that he ended up telling me to marry, he ended up being the full-time youth pastor of my dad's church. And there was abuse happening in the home. And because my dad was the pastor, my mom was the pastor's wife, I was the youth pastor's wife. Like, who was I going to go to talk about what was happening inside the marital home? I didn't have anyone, and didn't really they didn't really promote therapy, like going to a professional therapist. It was like, if you're going to need counseling, you go to the pastor. Well, the pastor was my dad and my mom. Like, I'm not going to them. So I was sort of stuck. I was like, how am I going to get out of this? And there was a lady in the church at the time who, I don't know how she saw signs, but she saw something in me because I felt like I put on a pretty good facade when I was at church because I was afraid if I kind of let off that there was bad stuff going on, that things would get worse when we got home, right? And so she kind of pulled me aside one day at church and handed me a little piece of paper and she said, "This is a number. I don't know for sure what's going on, but call this number if you need help." And I was like, okay. So a couple days later, I called the number, and the number was a place called First Step in Plymouth, Michigan. And it is a nonprofit domestic violence organization. And I made an appointment. I went in, I talked to one of the counselors, and they were immediately alarmed at the situation that I was telling them that I was in. And they said, "You and your daughter need to get to a safe house." And I'm like, that scared me really bad because I'm like, maybe I don't realize maybe it's worse than what I'm realizing because I'm living in this day in and day out. And this person who doesn't know me is telling me this is a red alarm situation, like time to get out. And
so
I was,
this chaos was your norm, right? Like
yeah, it was my norm.
is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, I was living in this day in and day out. So, like, yeah, I knew there was abuse going on. Yes, I was concerned for my safety and my daughter's safety, but I was like, eventually I'm gonna find a way to leave. But I was just waiting for an answer on how to do that because I didn't know. And plus, you have the fear of the cult mentality, like, again, if you step outside of what they consider God's will, like divorce is definitely not in their consideration God's will. If you step outside of God's will, then you're in danger of like God's judgment. Something bad could happen to you. You could die in a car accident. You could get
Right.
cancer. Your daughter could be killed, any
Yes.
number of things that they're telling you. So then it prevents you from actually living your life or making decisions on your own.
Hmm.
So anyways, the counselor was like, "We need to find you need to get into a safe house." And I said, "Well, I'm not going to do that because that freaked me out." It was like the curfew thing and then not being able to tell my family where I was and, all those things. And I said, "Well, I think I could just go to my parents' house and I would be safe." And she goes, "Well, at the very least, you need an exit plan." And so she told me how to do that, a go bag together and be ready to exit, never be in a room where you can't escape with him, all of those things. And so there's something that happened that occurred one night at 2 a.m. and I left. I took my daughter, got the go bag, got into the car and went to my parents' house. I ultimately ended up getting a restraining order. The the things that occurred sort of happened in sequence where I was able to leave. My dad ended up firing him as a youth pastor for a lot of different reasons that I won't even go into, but it ultimately led to my escape. And then I ended up having to get that restraining order because there were threats made. Of course, always under the guise of, well, God is going to take care of you and God is going to make sure that whatever. And I told David, I mean, there were nights where he would have a loaded handgun on his nightstand and he would just pick it up and remind me, like, if you ever try to leave, like, there's the gun. And there was one day that I knew he was going to be at work. I had already left. I was staying with my parents. The restraining order was in the process of getting it. And I had gone back to the house to get a couple of my daughter's items. I walked into her nursery, and there was our open wedding album on the floor with a shotgun next to it, an open Bible on her dresser, and two bullets standing on end like this. And I was like, oh my gosh. And I panicked and I'm like, I have to get out of here. Like, obviously, he knew I was going to come back at some point,
Right.
and he was leaving me a clear message.
Absolutely.
And so I'm just like, I'm not playing around with this. It's just I've gotta be done. And so that was the end of the end, but the beginning of another hellish chapter of my life. But yeah, I made it out. My daughter made it out. And but then of course then you have like the shunning from the church because he stayed not within my dad's church because he got fired, but he stayed within that specific cult. He went to another church that was that same belief system. And so because he was in church and I wasn't, he was automatically labeled as the good parent because he's still in church, he's still teaching his daughter about God, and I was out just whatever.
Did did your parents believe you when you told them what had been happening to you?
They did actually, but my dad was always super concerned with what the cult members thought of him, and he was very concerned about his ministry at the church. And so he made me more or less jump through hoops. He was like, well, I have a Christian counselor that I want you guys to talk to. And he actually administered this test called the MMPI.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with that?
Yes.
Okay, so he actually administered that test to both of us, and he told me that my ex didn't pass it.
Well, what he meant was your ex shows because the MMPI is you having taken it, I did too in a custody battle. And what that means is that the MMPI revealed that your ex was likely either a narcissist or a sociopath, what we call antisocial personality disorder, or a mix of both, which my ex, my daughter's father was the same. It was
Yeah, so he had to take it 3 times.
three times. Why
Three
three times?
times.
Did they want it to get better? Did they want him to learn
I
the
guess
answer?
I think he was insisting that
He wanted
not
to
he wanted to
manipulate it.
pass it.
He wanted to manipulate it.
Yes. And so he didn't pass it. All 3 times he didn't pass it. And basically the question was, what does that mean? What does that, in his
Right.
words, I swear to God to you, his words were, he's either a pathological liar or he is literally Jesus Christ in the flesh. And I was like, well, yeah, that makes sense. It tracks because the guy thinks he's perfect, like he does nothing
Right.
wrong in his
Right.
mind.
And this is a hallmark of the dark triad that they are so, the narcissistic characteristics are so intense that they actually do believe that they are some form of Messiah or prophet or whatever. I mean, we see that in our dear leader right now in the White
Mhm.
House.
Mhm.
But my daughter's father literally told my daughter, I am a reincarnation of Jesus, and I've never done anything wrong. Now,
Wow.
where have we heard that before?
Yeah.
So, but this is what they truly believe. And that comes out of, well, I don't think it's even important that we understand what it comes out of, because I feel like when we understand what it comes out of, that can cause people to sort of garner some sympathy for them. And that's very dangerous to garner sympathy for them because they will not change. And
Right. What
that
I am curious though, what does that come out of? Because I'm definitely not going to garner any sympathy, trust me. There's no sympathy to be had for that man.
It typically comes out of a childhood where there's sort of a mix, especially with sociopathy, but this is true for narcissism as well. A mix of telling the child you can do no wrong and really, lavishing them with all sorts of praise, and or absolutely no acknowledgement of their value at all from any parent. So it can go either way. So many of them come out of it's I think there's a lot I forget the number, but there's a large percentage of folks that have narcissism and sociopathic traits who had extreme abuse in childhood. David Koresh, David Berg, I always forget his last name, the Heaven's Gate guy, Applewhite. Um, they come out of these situations where there is extreme abuse or neglect. It doesn't have to be overt abuse, but it can be neglect, just not acknowledging the child's worth or value. I think what we see in Mr. Trump is a childhood where he had a mother who was largely absent because she was depressed and laid up in bed or in hospitals for psychiatric issues, and wasn't there for him to mother him or nurture him, and a father who was harsh and critical and abusive. And that set up in him this need to try to get validation in any way possible. And that's what they're really lacking. They're really lacking a sense of self. So what they do is they develop this sort of false, grandiose
Mm.
self. I'm everything to everyone. I'm the best. You've never seen anything like it. I'm the best. And then and then along the way, they learn how to manipulate, because manipulation, we've all learned how to manipulate through childhood. Let's face it. I mean, it's not, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. We know how to manipulate our environment to get the things that we want or need, right? But theirs is in more of a Machiavellian, no regard for anyone else's feelings. I'm going to get what I want without any regard for how my actions to get what I want affect other people. And that's what makes them very dangerous. And they
Mm.
also then, they know, they start to see, okay, when I did this, that person responded in this way. They start to learn from it. And so then they start to understand, they start to see how to mask what other people, when other people show empathy, they start to see what that looks like, and they learn how to fake it. So that,
Mm.
and make other people think that they do have empathy, that they really do care about you, that they do want what's best for you.
Yeah. Because you're right. And, and using, Donald Trump and MAGA as an example, and I'm going to do it respectfully, like I'm learning, is that people believe that Donald Trump is for the average working class man, and he's never been one of those. So but he's learned how to speak as if he's learned how
Yeah.
to mimic
Mm.
that for us to believe, for people to believe that he can relate, that he is one of them, right?
Right.
Am I understanding that?
Yes. He was able to convince them that he had the cure for everything that ails them.
Okay, so it's not that
Right.
he is that person, he just has the answer to fix that problem.
But
Gotcha. Okay.
much like them, they feel aggrieved, and they are rightfully
Sure.
aggrieved in many
Yeah.
ways. The farmers who've been forgotten, the middle class people who see no increases in their wages, but cost of living keeps skyrocketing, and they can't afford to live. And he gave them not only the sense that he has the way to fix it, but he gave them someone to blame.
Don't all politicians do that though? Like I hear every time
Extent.
there's like an election cycle, I'm just like, oh my God, here we go again. Like
Right.
each side is going to be saying basically the same thing about the other side. And it's hard to listen to. It's like it's literally like a repeat every single cycle. It just
Yeah.
seems like,
Yeah.
but they all just have like a new tagline that they use.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I mean, it's on both sides of the aisle. I mean,
Yeah.
when we look at the things that have happened recently, prime example, Eric Swalwell. He had a lot of people fooled outside of the Beltway in DC, right? Inside the Beltway, everybody kind of had his number.
And that
And if
pisses me
you
off.
I know. And if you were going to become a staffer working for him, people would warn you. You better like cover your drink if you're out with him and you better watch out. And yet people like me, for instance, all I saw was the guy on television who
I thought
presents,
he was for victims.
yeah, but I hope he goes down.
Yeah.
And I'm a Democrat. I hope he goes down.
Well, I think that's the difference between us and the cult mentality, right?
Right,
Is
right,
we can say that I don't care what party you're assigned to.
Right.
You've done bad things,
right,
you're out. You
right.
know, we're not going to justify this. I
Mhm.
actually have an episode because I'm starting to do like little mini episodes where I'm
Mhm.
learning things along the way, and so I'm trying to share those. So we were really like connecting with those.
Yeah.
And when this happened with Eric, I actually made it one of my. I think I released it yesterday, if not tonight. But because I did not want to take a chance of being called out of you keep calling out MAGA, you keep calling out, these preachers that keep getting that voted for Trump and they're going to jail for, child porn. And so I bumped that up to like number 2 episode because I wanted to show that I don't give a damn about your political stance or you rape people, you hurt
Right,
children, you hurt
Yeah.
right,
women, anybody, I want
right.
you down. I want you out.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think, Jenny, coming back to your point, I think that anyone who's in politics, anyone who wants to rise through the ranks of politics, actually, it's true of school board members, city council members. It doesn't kind of matter at what level. They all should be looked at sort of with a side eye by the rest of us,
Mm-hmm.
uh, and examined for where the hypocrisies might be in their lives and in their characters.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree with you on that. I've said that for a long time. And I saw it even just in our local county commissioners. We would have these meetings, and you could see the ones who were trying to control what everyone was thinking. And it's like, no, do not gaslight me and tell me this isn't happening. Like,
It's the gaslighting again.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So, do people go in with the hopes with the, I guess with the idea of creating a cult, or does it just kind of just happen on its own?
Obviously, I'm not a psychologist or a psychiatrist or any doctor in front of my name, but
That doesn't matter. You have this experience and it's very valuable.
And you have
so
podcaster in front of your name, so you're good.
yeah, but I don't have any letters after my name. That's what I really need.
Hey, if Joe Rogan can claim to be an expert on anything,
That's
Jenny,
right.
you're
Okay, all
fine.
right.
You're fine.
Um, so I would say no, they don't have to go in and say, I'm about to create this cult. I think that they have this narcissistic mindset that they just have this insatiable need to control people. And it's like an addiction. David and I talked about this on my episode where my ex-husband, it was like once I left and he could no longer control me, we went through the family court system, which is a whole nother just ball of wax. But you basically have to be an axe murderer in order to not get rights to your child. Like you, or
Yes.
you have to give up rights as a parent in order to not have rights. So in other words, sorry, you're going to get some kind of rights to your child. And so when you are co-parenting with a narcissist and they're not able to control you day in and day out in a marital home, they're going to use the child to do that.
That's right.
And so whether they consciously go into, I'm going to start a cult, I'm going to do this, I'm going to, whatever. I think it's just that you have to have a person who has such a narcissistic personality that they just have an insatiable need to control people. And then it will just
Mm.
fall in line, whatever, happens. And I think you will have even people who are more pragmatic in their personality, people who love to be up in front of people, who love a crowd, who have no problem with public speaking. You have to look out for those people oftentimes because
Right,
those are the people who they love that energy they get from the crowd. And
right.
so even when you talk about like Taylor Swift or some of these celebrities, I do think there's a little bit of that cult mentality and a little bit of that narcissistic personality because they do feed off of that energy. It's like, I have to have it.
Yes.
It's like an addiction.
But
Right.
it's not always handled in a negative way, though, right? Like there's
No.
ways to have those things, but to not use them negatively. Okay.
Right. And
Right.
I don't really know much about the Swifties. I like some of her music, but I don't really know much about. But I don't I've not heard of any, attempts on her part to indoctrinate people who like her music and tell them to think in a certain way or whatever. I know that she has spoken out politically,
Yeah.
and that's been criticized. Uh,
Yeah.
but she's not telling her fans, look, you have to think this way like I do, or you're not a fan of mine,
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
love that you said that because, like, I guess where I get so mad when people want to say like the Swiftie cult is because I don't want to normalize that word, where it becomes a where that word is where it loses its power when it comes to when we're talking about the IFB, when we're talking about MAGA. Like, if we think of cult and we immediately go to Taylor Swift fans, when Taylor Swift is lovely, like
Mhm.
I don't want the word cult to lose its power. And I think that's where I get a little frustrated with because like you said, I've
Right.
never heard Taylor say anything. I don't want to lose the power and the meaning behind that word.
And even at that, I mean, the word cult and the suggested eight sort of definitions that I just went through, or the eight, what did he call them? Eight deadly sins. There's, I think that that doesn't apply to every group, and cults can be large or small. Uh, they may not possess all of those deadly sins as well. So the word cult itself is sort of a soft, it's not a hard definition of a group.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. So I guess I've created my own definition with it just because of where, like I hear Jenny's stories. I edit her episodes where she has a guest on each week. And so when I hear the word cult, to me, it's every time I hear it, it's like a punch. Like I feel it,
Hmm. Hmm.
so for you to say there's like the true definition of it isn't as harsh, or forgive me if I'm using that, if I'm saying it
It's
incorrectly.
it's debatable, let's put it that way.
Okay, gotcha,
It's
gotcha. Because to me, in my
debatable.
mind, it wasn't, right? Like I just knew
Right.
that people I loved were in something that was awful to them, and I hate that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah.
wow, yeah,
And the people that listen to my episodes, a lot of them are still in that same cult and they'll listen and they'll be like, that wasn't a cult. You're just acting like a victim. You're sensationalizing it, whatever. And it's like, they're still in it. So they're not going
Right.
to see it until they get outside of it. They're just
Exactly.
not going to see the truth.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. It's frustrating. But what can somebody do to make sure that they don't go from one cult, leave that cult, and say, well, I'm out of the cult now, and end up in another cult unknowingly?
There's nothing to prevent that from happening other than that person's, if you leave a cult, what you need to do is you need to get into therapy and you need to examine the reasons why you got involved in the first place. And again, not to blame yourself. Therapy is not about, it shouldn't be about blaming yourself, because we don't want to victim blame, but we do need to understand, what is it about me that made me vulnerable to this? What was I looking for? What did I need that perhaps I need to be able to provide for myself, or provide in other ways that don't cost me my freedom to speak, think, dress, bodily autonomy, all of the rest? How can I get those needs met? And really dealing with what went on in my childhood. How do I, people go into therapy, it's always, interesting to me when I've done therapy with folks that, I'm like, okay, well, let's talk about your childhood and let's talk about your parents and what your family of origin was like. And they're always like, well, I don't, I had a good family. I had a good, they don't want to blame their families. And I have to tell them this is not about blaming anyone because everyone in your family was doing what they were doing because of their own reasons, maybe not with
Mhm.
nefarious intentions, but you grew up in that and you learned certain things. You learned to behave in certain ways. You learned certain ways of coping. And we need to kind of look at that so that we can build your sense of agency and autonomy and give you back that power.
Yeah, I love that you said that because when I got out and I was a single mom for almost 7 years, I put myself into therapy. And that right there was like one of the best decisions that I made for myself. And unfortunately, the healing process, I mean, it's ongoing. And so about 2 years after my divorce, I got into another serious relationship. Now we never got married or anything, but he was also very abusive. In some ways more abusive than my ex-husband was. And so I was in therapy at the time and I was telling my therapist about this and I'm like, why do I keep getting myself in these situations of abuse? Like
Mhm.
going into this relationship and then another relationship of abuse, like continuing this pattern. And we dove into that, but then she ultimately suggested that I go see a hypnotherapist just to like couple that with the therapy I was doing with her. And let me tell you, that was the cure. It was.
So
And
you discovered some things in hypnosis.
yes. And then from that point on, it was like I didn't even need a man at that point. You know what I mean? Like I was like, I'm
Yeah.
good. Like I'm good. I don't even need anyone. I was so much more confident in myself. I got rid of that other relationship and I was single for a while and then ultimately met my current husband Ryan, who is a wonderful, amazing person and we have a great relationship and it's not abusive and it's very healthy and all those things that I
And he's
wasn't
very
getting in the other.
handsome.
And he is very handsome. Yes,
He's a
yes,
good dad,
he is.
and he's my best friend.
I'm your
Oh,
number one best friend though. But I had to break that pattern. And so what are your thoughts on hypnotherapy for people who are like leaving a cult or leaving a very controlling relationship of any kind?
I would say that hypnotherapy needs to be approached cautiously. It's a modality that is still a little bit controversial. And,
Okay, that's
and
interesting.
yeah, and in many states, hypnotherapists could be literally like the gas station attendant decides to hang a shingle up and call himself a hypnotherapist. So, yes.
Stop it. No.
Yeah, in many states, yes. So you have to be cautious. You'd like it's not very well regulated, is what I'm trying to say. For instance,
Okay.
as a doctor, we doctors are regulated by our medical boards of our states. And
Hmm.
then we have to be board certified by a national board that oversees our particular discipline. So for instance, I'm what they call a diplomat of the American Board of Psychiatry and Neurology. I have to answer to the state board that where I live.
Hmm.
And there are rules and ethics, and you have to be certified. You have to have certifications, degrees.
Hmm.
Hypnotherapists, not necessarily. So I would say I would be cautious with that because I think that first and foremost, it's very important to work with someone who can teach you how to build what we call in the business ego strength, meaning your own understanding of your reality, validating your perceptions, your ability to set boundaries, your ability to recognize relationships around you and what they are before you go into hypnotherapy,
Hmm.
just to protect yourself.
Sure.
And then vet your hypnotherapist closely. Now, in hypnotherapy, people can come across memories of traumas that have happened to them. that maybe they wouldn't have remembered otherwise. So it is a valid way to deal with that in many ways, as long as your hypnotherapist is adequately trained and certified according to their state, and you've vetted them.
Mhm.
Another way, because really, I think what you people who come out of cults, many of them are dealing with a form of PTSD. You know, you've had your mind so manipulated that you don't know what's reality and what isn't. You don't trust your own perceptions of things, and you have perhaps intrusive memories of the traumas that you went through while in under the control of that group. Um, and it may make you unable to function because of being so easily startled, or scared to go out in public, avoidant of relationships. So another way to deal with that would be ketamine therapy, ketamine assisted therapy, which again, one has to be very cautious about, because the way that it's done correctly is the patient comes into a ketamine clinic, does whatever form of ketamine it is, whether it's an infusion through an IV or a nasal puff, and they stay with the therapist, who then works with them as they go into this dissociative state and things start to come up for them.
So
And
explain exactly what is ketamine.
so ketamine was originally developed as an anesthetic, and it was almost always used in veterinary medicine, but it is a hallucinogenic as well. The thing about ketamine that works with PTSD and the brain is that ketamine, through a number of molecular interactions in the cell membrane, causes a release of BDNF, brain derived neurotropic factor. It's a fancy way of saying a neurochemical that causes nerve growth. So it causes what we call neuroplasticity. So what you're able to do when you're in ketamine assisted therapy, particularly for a trauma, is with that therapist's help. Don't ever go with a clinic that's just going to send you a prescription of Spravato to take home and do whatever. You need to be with a therapist. But with that therapist's help, you can, as the traumas come up, they can help you reframe them and help you have a greater sense of empowerment through that memory, so that you build new neural tracks that help you to deal with that trauma in an empowered way, rather than still feeling victimized by it.
So this sounds a lot like EMDR.
That's
David,
that's what
is that
that's
what you were
what
going to say?
yeah, that's exactly what
Well,
like I haven't been hypnotized like you have,
mhm,
Jenny.
mhm.
And never really had the desire to. I've always kind of been a little weird with it. I don't know. I never fully trusted, I don't guess. What was the one we were just talking about?
EMDR,
Not EMDR, the ketamine.
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 I have been interested in that because Chelsea Handler did a whole thing where she documented her journey with it, and I thought it was really interesting. But then I see like the whole like where everyone says Elon Musk was on ketamine when he was on stage with black eyes and
Well,
sunglasses, and so like I'm like,
Elon Musk was abusing ketamine, so
right, right,
very important to understand that
yeah,
you never want to. As I tell my patients with their medications, we don't do the Dolly Parton method of pharmacology. More is not necessarily better. It's good on Dolly, but it's not good in the pharmaceutical area.
right, right,
So,
absolutely,
uh, so,
absolutely,
yeah, so ketamine used in appropriate doses and with the accompaniment of a therapist. But
yeah,
EMDR, let's talk about the difference.
yeah,
What EMDR does is it engages both hemispheres of the brain as you recall a traumatic memory. And what that has, and we still don't know why. We still don't know why, but for some reason, it unhinges the emotional feeling from the memory of the trauma. So you can have the memory of the trauma without being
Hmm.
triggered by it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I have done EMDR, and so Jenny,
Mhm.
we may need to have an episode on my EMDR journey and your hypnotic journey because that could be really
I would
interesting.
do, I would just do it as an episode.
Hey,
I would
right?
be like, who wants to do EMDR on me? I'll do it live. Let's do
And
it.
and
Yeah.
and then it, got a little to get a little plug in here. Then we can do an episode on TMS because TMS does a very similar thing for the brain. It causes neuroplasticity, transcranial magnetic stimulation.
And those are the clinics that you have,
Yeah.
right? So that was going to be the last question that I asked you. I would love to hear more about that because I don't know that I know a lot about that, and I I trust you, and I want it. What do I do?
Yeah, same. Let's do it.
Well, you have to come out here and stay with me for 6 weeks while you get
There
it.
you go. Oh, six
Perfect.
weeks. Okay.
TMS is a way of utilizing the electromagnetic field that circulates around an electrical current. So a lot of people they start to think about, oh, electroconvulsive therapy, the old, put
Mhm.
electricity through your brain. That's not what we're doing. What we're doing is we're putting two coils of wire side by side inside a plastic housing that does not conduct electricity. And then we're pulsing electrical pulses through those coils, and that emits an electromagnetic field that circulates around it. And we put those coils that look like two hockey pucks stuck together against your head like this, and that electromagnetic field penetrates the cortex of your brain about 5 millimeters. And there then is some reverberation throughout the brain. You don't have to go under anesthetic. You might feel a little tap. Some people have maybe a tiny little headache. Drive yourself there, drive yourself back. It's 30 minutes a day, 5 days a week for a total of 30 treatments. And what we're doing in my form of TMS that I have to toot my horn a little bit, I developed is we're doing an individualized treatment. Traditional TMS was developed back in 1985, and it's evolved since then. But traditional TMS treats only two areas of the brain. That's this area and this area, the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. Say that 5 times fast.
I'm not gonna say it one time.
Yeah.
But on the left side is where depression lives. On the right side is where anxiety lives. And that's typically, those are the only two places on your brain that traditional TMS will treat. We've developed a way of doing an EEG, a 19-lead EEG on your brain. We get a printout and we see where your brain waves are out of sync.
Oh,
And
wow.
then we start treating those areas, those particular areas of your brain from front to back to get all of your brain waves firing at the same frequency, sort of lined up on the same hashtag on the field. And then you have a coherent brain. And then anxiety goes away, depression goes away, your performance improves, your attention and focus improve, your sleep improves. We can treat migraines, we can treat OCD. It's FDA approved only for major depressive disorder that is not responding to antidepressants because who owns us, baby?
Oh,
The
yeah. The
pharmaceutical companies.
pharmaceutical companies. Yeah. They don't want people to get cured.
No. So yeah, so that's it in a nutshell.
Oh
Oh
my
my gosh.
gosh. That sounds amazing though.
It
Yeah.
is it's so I have found a renewed enthusiasm and passion in the work that I do because as a psychiatrist, I've been so disappointed with medications, and not to mention that they often either aren't effective or they're effective only for a period of time, and then you have to change dose or change medication, and they cause side effects. And
Hmm.
so this is a way to treat this without medication.
Hmm.
And you can see people actually get better. We used to have a little, and there's dark humor in medicine. So when I
Sure.
was when I was in residency, we used to have this phrase, he was so depressed. He was so depressed when he walked in, the lights dimmed. And that's kind of what
His
we see.
energy just brought everything
Everybody's
down,
like, yeah.
including the light bulbs.
Right. But you get to see folks like that improve to where, they're walking out and the lights go on, their lights are on and they're shining and they're happy.
That's
So
cool. That's
That's great.
amazing. I have a question to go back to the ketamine thing. So I had a guest on recently that, and I'm going to give him a little plug too. Troy Ushofer. He is the founder of Vines and Valor. And so it's a nonprofit organization that helps veterans get grants for these ayahuasca retreats.
Oh,
And
yeah.
and so you're talking about ketamine, and I'm like, that's a little similar to what he was talking about with what ayahuasca does, and that they're trying to get this to veterans who have experienced PTSD. But I'm like, well, what about people like that aren't veterans that need this too? Is this,
Yeah. I mean, first responders, for instance,
yes.
your firemen, your policemen, your EMTs, everybody. And I'm not sure how much ayahuasca has been studied in terms of understanding what it does on the biomolecular level of the brain, but I suspect it's something similar to what ketamine does and what psilocybin does.
Mhm.
Because there are certain ionic channels that open and then release these factors. So it will be interesting to see if someone starts studying that.
Yeah.
So, okay, so my question is, with your service, antidepressants, the goal is to not be on them forever, correct?
Sometimes, but some people really require it,
Okay,
unfortunately.
perfect. Because I have tried to wing off before through my doctor, right? I worked with my doctor to try to wing off. And I don't know if I just wasn't ready then. I will say it was around like maybe like the 5, 6 year mark when I thought,
Mhm.
oh, like I'm back to work. I have a great relationship. I'm comfortable in my home. So I think
Right.
I'm cured. So if I'm on antidepressants now and I
Mhm.
come see you, is one of the goals is this 30-day treatment to get me off that medication, or is that two different things that
I leave that up to the patient
gotcha?
and their doctor who's prescribing it for them. Many times when they're referred by their doctor, it's because everything is failing.
Yeah.
And, their doctor's like, I'm at the end of I don't have any other rabbits to pull out of my hat here, and you need to go in. I always leave that up to them. I'm not going to be the one that takes them off of their medication. I want that to be between them and the doctor that's prescribing it for them. But many times that ends up being the result is they start to wean off toward the end of their treatment. And I always tell them, hey, wait a month, because we want to see oftentimes the improvement is ramping up through the 6 weeks, and then 4 weeks beyond that, they get to optimal benefit. So I always ask them to kind of wait and see. But
I love. Okay, Jenny, we've got to go to California for 30 days.
yeah.
We're gonna do the what is it? I always forget.
The
Ayahuasca.
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 Mhm,
You know
mhm.
what? Let's just plan to take the next summer off. And we're gonna go and we're gonna have cameras and we're gonna get cured
Yeah.
Yeah.
with whatever we're ailing at the time.
Yeah.
Do you have to go to the Amazon to do the ayahuasca?
No, so there's actually places in the United States that
United States.
are certified to administer
Yeah.
these modalities, they call them, I guess. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, that
Interesting.
that would be the drawback for me. I'm not
Same.
sure I want to traipse through. I'm pretty outdoorsy, but I'm more
No.
like give me the mountains and the grizzly bears. I'm not sure I want the jungle and the whatever's in there.
Yeah.
Same.
Yeah. I know there's one place in Maine, and then I think there's another one in Orlando. But yeah, Troy, my guest, he went to the Amazon and did it. And outside in the rainforest, laying under a tree, I'm like, I couldn't do that. I could not do
Yeah.
that at night. No way. That right there would just give me a bad trip. I
Wake
know
up with a boa constrictor around your neck.
it. Exactly. Or a big tarantula or something.
Yeah, Sandra, you should check out his episode. He's gonna come on ish as well, but you should check out his episode on Unholier. Like he's a really cool guy.
Awesome. I will.
And you might even recognize him from TikTok because I think that's kind of where he started getting a lot
Mhm.
of his traction, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Jenny, before we start closing out, because like we had talked about, and it might have been off record or whatever, but we may just keep this as an ongoing conversation because there's no way to fit all of this into 1 hour and it's been an hour and 40 minutes. You know what I mean? And
Mhm.
we barely touched anything. This is our way of having Sandra come back and spend more time with us. It was all part of my
Yeah.
master plan. But Jenny, do not that I'm trying to start a cult, but I do have one last question that I want to have for you all. But I want to make sure I want to see, like, do you have any other last questions or anything before I do mine?
Mm-mm.
I just want to say that I
Please.
think that there will be more discussion for us to have as we start to see things I believe inevitably crumbling in the MAGA world. It's happening now, and I think that there will be much more to observe and talk about.
That's a great segue into my last question. This is for both of you, because I am truthfully trying my best to learn how to. I mean, I live in the South. I'm trying my best to learn how to navigate being a gay man, I mean, very, very blue and very, very red territory. I tried being nice and understanding, and it didn't work. And so I tried the shaming. I tried the you're a pedophile protector. I tried those things. That doesn't work. I'm ready to try another step. Do you all have thoughts or suggestions for me of what you think that maybe I should try?
Jenny?
Oh man. Okay. David, I think that again, trying to look at it from the other person's perspective, if they were trying to convert you to their side, how would they need to approach you in order for you to get to see where they're coming from? And that's not just talking politics, that's anything in life,
Sure.
right? So if you have a disagreement with somebody and you want them to see your side, you can't come at them combatively. You have to be able to approach them in a way that gets them to lay down the armor, lay down the weapon, and say, okay, let's have this conversation as two adults. I want to see where you're coming from. I want you to see where I'm coming from. And so, just to try and figure out a something that we can all agree on, right? Okay. And there are things, and I know this because I know a lot of people who are still in MAGA, that the MAGA people are very frustrated with. One of those things is the Jesus Christ depiction that he did last week. A lot of these people they're considering themselves Christian and they're very upset thinking that this is very blasphemous behavior. And so that is a common thread that you could use to say, "Hey, we both agree on this point, right? Let's talk about it." So you're finding commonalities with people and then that will get them to start letting their guard down with you and having those open conversations. Because if you can say, we see eye to eye on this, then maybe you can find other things that you see eye to eye too. So that's my advice.
Yeah.
I Yeah, I agree.
And I do respect that. And it's something that I want to try to learn. I think that I'm learning that, like, I had some time where I've really been analyzing this, and it's something that has been hard for me to even say out loud. But I think this MAGA movement is very triggering to me. And
Mhm.
I struggled with how triggering it was because I was like, I'm not in a cult. I'm not a bad person because I associate MAGA with bad people, and that's me putting a blanket on everyone when, like you said, there are some of the good ones that are just they're looking out for their wallets or whatever, and they were misled. And so it's like, I love what you said about this whole, like, Jesus picture thing. We can find that we both hate this, but
Or even the
what?
Epstein files. I mean, I know people in
Right?
Mega that are furious about this. Like he said, he ran on this point. He said he was going to do this, that, and put all these people away, drain the swamp, and he's not doing it. They're frustrated. So those are things that
Yeah.
you can come together and be like, hey, we're frustrated. You're frustrated. This is what we can both agree on.
And what I have a hard time separating is because I agree with all that, but I go in blazing because I'm like, oh, it took this, but you didn't care about the trans, which has been day one what they
But
didn't fight,
not
what they
everybody
didn't.
has the same belief system as
Well,
you.
exactly. Well,
That's
and that's the 100%. That is absolutely
yeah.
correct. But
Yeah.
I like that's where I'm, because then it trickles down, right? Then I'm like, well, then gay rights have been played and toyed with, and voting rights. So it took your Jesus for you to say, oh, you know what? maybe when I've been trying to tell you that my rights or my trans friends' rights are on the line. There's trans that can't drive in certain states right now. Like, you know what
Right.
I mean? So where I get triggered is I have a hard time saying, okay, here's that common ground
Right.
because I'm already at 100 over
You're
here
already,
because I've
yeah.
been there since
And
the,
believe me, I have some personal reasons as well, as you
yeah,
know, to be very angry and
Mhm.
resentful about that. But I do think, and I don't think, I mean, I was trying to imagine myself saying, "Oh yes, I too think that that is blasphemous." I don't, but I do think that it is an indication of such extreme grandiosity and
Mhm.
perhaps even delusional,
Oh yeah.
crazy thinking that makes, if it was anyone else, like if your neighbor was doing this and worked at the grocery store, you probably wouldn't give a rat's ass. But this is the president of the most powerful man in the world who
Mhm.
has the ability to send our sons and daughters into war or push, God forbid, the nuclear button. And for him to exhibit that level of grandiosity and really delusionality is very, very frightening. And so I think that even from that perspective, as a person who's a religious, I'm not an atheist, but I'm a religious. I could probably have that discussion with someone who's devoutly Christian and is very offended by that from the perspective that, and how crazy and delusional and grandiose do you have to be to put something that like that out on social media? Isn't that's frightening? And I think that that would be common ground right there, you know.
Mhm.
I
I,
don't think that they would reject me for having that perspective.
right. Yeah. And I'm really taking all this in, and that's why I'm so glad that we have things on recording because I can just listen to it over and over and over. But here's what I was thinking is I think that I need to know here and believe that just because I find the common ground and focus on that one common ground with that person does not mean I'm steering away from the things I truly believe in. And I think that I feel like if I have a MAGA person's attention and we want to talk about this picture that they find blasphemous, if I don't say, well, what about the gays? What about the trans? What about the women's rights? What about abortions? What about women's anatomy? If I don't hit all those things, then I'm not staying true to myself. And I need to forget that, right? Like that's
Right.
not true,
Yeah,
right?
you have to come to where you have to meet them where they are. I mean, it's just like that story I've told on here before about meeting the enormous 6'7" dude that at a city council meeting who's an oath keeper. And he was speaking out against having Pride Month on the city proclamations list. And I have a family member who's a member of the LGBTQ community, and I was there to say, hey, this is why do we want to make them feel more marginalized, that sort of thing. He was upset because he had gotten death threats from being mistaken for someone else, and they were coming from the left, from the liberal side, and he was, mad because he was getting death threats, and his family was on their voicemail, and I went up to him afterwards and I said, "I'm so sorry that you feel unsafe, that you and your family, this is not fair, that you guys would have to live in fear." And I want to tell you that I'm I'm a Democrat. I'm sort of on the left, but I understand what it means to live in fear. And that's because of someone whom I love more than life is a member of the LGBTQ community, is a trans person. And he said, "Oh, well, my sister's trans and I don't believe in that. I'm a Christian." And but I said, "Yes, but would you agree that not everyone in this country is a Christian? And wouldn't you want your sister to be able to live without fear?" And he said, "Well, yes, and there should be separation of church and state." And I said, "Right on. Like we agree." And I told him, I'm like, if we could sit down for coffee, I'm sure we would find so many points on which we agree. Unfortunately, we didn't get that chance because shortly thereafter, he went to the Capitol to riot on January 6th and got thrown in prison. So,
Wow. Okay.
but, but nonetheless, for that moment in time,
Hmm.
We kind of found that little common ground. And I thought, see, this is what we need to be doing.
Right. Yep. Yeah, and I agree totally. Like you need to meet people where they're at because you're not going to get everybody to agree with you on all the points that you want to convince them about. If you can just find the common points like you and that guy did, that is where real change starts, I think, and where we can start having those open discussions and seeing where the other person relates and where we can relate to them. Because in the end, we're all human beings, right? We want to live peaceably together.
Right.
And I feel like that's really the only way to do that.
I want to say there's an organization called Better Angels. I don't know if you all have heard of it,
Mm-mm.
but it's an organization that brings together people of opposite sides of the political spectrum to have discussions, not to convince one another, not to talk down to one another or reprimand one another, but just to have discussions to see where their common ground is.
I love that. That's
Yeah.
really cool.
I think I need to be there because I do care. But I don't know what it is that well, I mean, I think I do know what it is that's triggering me with all of this. There's a lot of sex scandals involved in it, and I have always hated that. And then I became a victim of one, and so of course that's more triggering. And but I want to have these conversations. I want to not be an asshole and come in guns blazing, but I always felt like if I did, it was going to be some kind of hypocritical, some kind of, oh, you're showing empathy and sympathy to someone that doesn't deserve it because they didn't have empathy and sympathy for you. And so I thought that I was being a bit of a traitor, and I don't, and so I feel like I'm starting to lose the core of who I am as a person, trying to defeat MAGA, who I'm not going to change their mind, you know?
Right. And that's the thing with members of cults. That's why there has to be a deprogramming when people come out, so to speak. Nothing's black and white. Like I said, that human beings of any group are not a monolith. Everyone has their own individual psychological makeup that we
Hmm.
have to respect.
Wow. Well, I didn't know this was going to turn into a therapy session for me. I'm going to get an invoice in my email that says, "This is your bill for your therapy session," and I will gladly pay it. And I mean that from both of you. But no, I love this conversation. I know that we talked a lot, but obviously we didn't get to cover everything. And so yeah, let's keep this on going. And Sandra, you I'm such a fan of you.
And
Just
I'm such a fan of yours.
well, thank you.
I
You're helping me grow. So imagine how great I'm going to be
am.
when all my chakras are aligned. If I'm this
Right.
great now, imagine after 30 days with
You are
you.
going to be so great.
I may
So
be the
great.
next president.
That's right. You could be. Next thing you know, he's posting a. We don't.
No.
I love these conversations because I learned so much, but we find a way to talk about them and we still laugh. So thank you for being my friend. And Jenny, you're my heart. I love we get to do this, and I'll let you say all the compliments you want to say to me.
Oh gosh, David. I know. And there's just too many to list. But no, seriously, I had fun. This was a great conversation. And Sandra, I gotta have you on Unholier. We have to talk more about cults and all of the things because I mean, from your standpoint, I think a lot of people will have questions. And I don't know if you'd be interested in coming on mine, but I'd love to have
I'd
you
be
on
happy
sometime.
to. Yeah.
Cool. Cool.
It's been such a pleasure meeting you, Jenny, and I want to hear. I'm going to go and listen to all your episodes now because I'm just so fascinated with your experience, and you're just such a beautiful woman with a beautiful heart.
Oh,
So
oh,
I'm so glad you're telling your story and you're getting other people's stories out there. It's very important.
thank you so much. I appreciate it. And David, as always, I love you. You are my bestie. And thanks for having me on today.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll end it there. But Sandra, my love,
Yes. Love you,
I
David.
love you. Thank you for spending this time with us. Go have
Thank you.
uh it's probably what, just lunch. I was gonna say it's dinner time for
It's
me. It's probably
it's
lunchtime
two
for you.
o'clock. It's 2 o'clock here.
Oh, okay.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna go sit by the pool.
Oh,
Nice.
nice.
Nice. Well, thank you so much. And I'll be in touch with everything. But yeah, we'll plan a time to all get together again and all that good stuff.
Sounds great. Okay, you too. Take care.
Okay, see you
Bye.
soon, my love. Thank you. Isn't she
She's
amazing?
amazing. She's amazing.